All right, we're now going to talk about skeletal system, section 2, part E of the skeletal system on microscopic anatomy and bone connective tissue. Bone connective tissue, also known as osseous connective tissue, is the primary component of bone. It's bone composed of cells and extracellular matrix. The cells of the bone, there's four types that are found in the bone connective tissue. The osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. So with osteoprogenitor cells, they're the stem cells that are derived from the mesenchyme. The cellular division yields another stem cell and a committed cell, and that committed cell matures to become an osteoblast. So you have the osteoprogenitor cell, and basically it divides, and you end up with another osteoprogenitor cell and, of course, an osteoblast. And that's located in the periosteum and the endosteum. And those osteoblasts form they're formed from the osteoprogenitor stem cells, synthesize and secrete osteoid, the initial semi-solid organic form of the bone matrix. And the osteoid later calcifies and becomes part of the bone. And osteoblasts become entrapped within the matrix and they differentiate into mature osteocytes. Osteocytes are the mature bone cells that are derived from the osteoblasts, and they detect bone stress and they trigger new bone formation. Osteoclasts are a large multinuclear phagocytic cell that are derived from the fused bone marrow cells. They are the ruffled border, increases the surface area exposed to bone. They're located within and adjacent to a depression pit on the bone's surface. That's the resorption lacuna, and they're involved in bone resorption. So we were types of bone cells in our bone connective tissue. Our osteoprogenitor cells develop into osteoblasts. The osteoblast forms the bone matrix. Some osteoblasts differentiate into osteocytes, and the osteocytes maintain that bone matrix. Let me just make it a little closer there. So the osteoprogenitor cells develop into osteoblasts. Osteoblasts form that bone matrix. These osteoblasts sometimes differentiate into osteocytes, which maintain that bone matrix. And over here, we can see our nuclei here with an osteoclast and then endosteum here, where it's located here, fusing the bone marrow cell here. These lysosomes here playing a role here. We'll talk about them shortly. And the ruffled border here. And then we have the resorption lacuna all through here. You can see a more of a microscopic view through a microscope, specifically osteoblasts there. Osteoclasts here, and our osteocytes, the little guys here. Well, they appear little, of course, as a microscope, but the other guys, these little guys here, are osteocytes. The bone matrix has organic, of course, and inorganic components. The organic components are the osteoid produced by the osteoblasts, and it contains the collagen protein. We're giving the strength or the tensile strength, and a semi-solid ground substance of proteoglycans and glycoproteins. And of course, our organic components give the bone their tensile strength by resisting stretching, and it contributes to bone flexibility, though, as well. Inorganic components, salt crystals, calcium phosphate, interacts with calcium hydroxide, forms crystals, hydroxyapatite, or hydroxyapatite, and other substances are incorporated into the crystals, like calcium carbonate, sodium, magnesium, sulfate, and fluoride. Crystals deposit around these collagen fibers, and it hardens the matrix and accounts for the rigidity of the bones. So with bone formation, it begins with secretion of this osteoid, and calcification occurs with the deposition of the hydroxyapatite crystals, and the calcium and phosphate ions precipitate out and form the crystals. This process, though, requires vitamin D, which enhances the calcium absorption for the GI tract, and vitamin C, which is required for collagen formation, and calcium and phosphate for the calcification. Bone resorption. The bone matrix is destroyed by substances that are released from the osteoclasts, and then proteolytic enzymes are released from these lysosomes, which we showed in the picture here a moment ago, within the osteoclasts, and they chemically digest the organic matrix components. And the calcium and the phosphate is dissolved by hydrochloric acid, and the freed calcium and phosphate ions enter the blood, and this occurs when the blood calcium levels are low to resorb that bone. Clinical view of osteotitis deformans that results from disruption between the osteoclast and the osteoblast function, which is obviously it's not a very good thing, like so many other problems. It's characterized by excessive bone resorption followed by excessive bone deposition. Larger osteoclasts resorb bone at a much higher rate, and the newly deposited bone is formed poorly, excuse me. And the most commonly affected bones are the pelvis, the skull, the vertebrae, the femur, and the tibia. And of course, symptoms are bone deformity and pain. Looking at compact bone, it's composed of small cylindrical structures called osteons, or Haversian systems, and they're basic functional and structural unit of mature compact bone. They're oriented parallel to bone diaphysis, and they appear as a bullseye target. We'll take a look at that here shortly. The osteon components are the central canal, the cylindrical channel at the center of the osteon and parallel to it, the blood vessels and nerves extending through the channel, the concentric lamellae, the rings of the bone connective tissue, and they surround the central canal, the collagen fibers. They're 90 degrees from these collagen fibers are 90 degrees from the previous and next lamellae, and they give the bone their strength and their resilience. Our osteocytes are mature bone cells. They're found in the small spaces between the concentric lamellae, or lacunae, and they're in the they maintain the bone matrix. And the canaliculi, they're tiny interconnecting channels within bone connective tissue, canaliculi, I should say. They extend from each lacuna. They travel through the lamellae and connect to lacunae and the central canal. And they house the osteocyte projections that allow intracellular contact. They allow the exchange of the nutrients, the minerals, the gases, and the waste between the blood vessels and those osteocytes. Now we can take a look here. Seeing our compact bone, seeing our lacunae. Basically this looks like this bullseye here, right with the target in the middle here. But these osteocytes, with the osteocyte right there, and the osteon is this whole space here throughout. The central canal space here, concentric lamellae, and the canaliculi right in here. And we get more of a view through a microscope here. Another one here, seeing a central canal here with the osteon. And the central canal again contains those blood vessels in the middle here, central area there, and the lacunae here. You can see those little open locations there, or appearing to be open. And then in spongy bone, we have trabeculae, or the spongy bone, and the red bone marrow. Structures in the long bone that are not part of the osteon are these perforating canals, the Volkmann canals. Perpendicular to the central canals, they connect the central canals within different osteons. You have a circumferential lamellae. The external, the rings of the bone run immediately internal to the periosteum. The internal, the rings of the bone run internal to the endosteum, and both run the entire circumference of that bone. The interstitial lamellae are the components of the compact bone between the osteons or partially resorbed osteons. So we can see our components of our bone here are osteons. We have our diaphysis, the long shaft, that long bone of the humerus. Within it, you've got our central canal here with our, of course, our arteries and our veins and nerve root there. And basically we have here the internal circumferential lamellae going around. Osteon is that whole entire space there. The external circumferential lamellae here. Perforating fibers, you can see that periosteum. The cellular layer and the fibrous layer of the periosteum. And of course, a closer look here, the central canal here, taking a look through this way, as well as these perforating canals that go perpendicular to that primary canal. And then we have, kind of a closer look here, these collagen fiber orientation. You can see they kind of go opposite each other in this kind of diagonal pattern, so that you can absorb or withstand torsion of the bone. You may have heard of a torsion fracture, which luckily doesn't happen very often, because that's would truly be a painful thing to have. Luckily, I've never had one, but people who have had it is both very difficult to recover from and intensely painful. Bone is designed to primarily withstand torsion, at least to some degree, right? The concentric lamellae, you can see each one of these here, these surrounding structures here. And it goes around, of course, in these like layers of a tree, and looking at a tree trunk. And again, a closer look here again at our osteocyte, and the lacuna here with the canaliculi here extending out. Spongy bone, trabeculae is the open lattice of the narrow rods, the plates of the bones. The bone marrow fills these spaces. It's the meshwork of the crisscrossing bars, and it has resistance to stress. The parallel lamellae or tuberculae, or lamellae. The bone matrix is the parallel lamellae, and the osteocytes between the lamellae and the caniculi radiate from the lacunae. And we can see this interstitial lamellae here, and a space for the bone marrow, and these tuberculae, and the caniculi opening at the surface. And we have the endosteum, those little osteoclasts here attaching there, the parallel lamellae, and the osteocyte in the lacuna here, these guys. And the osteoblasts that are lined along the tuberculi of the new bone, with the caniculi opening at the surface here as well. And the microscopic anatomy for the hyaline cartilage, connective tissue. The structure of the hyaline cartilage: cells are scattered through the matrix of protein fibers. They're embedded in a gel-like ground substance. It includes the proteoglycans, but not the calcium. They're resilient, they're flexible. They have a high percentage of water in that hyaline cartilage. It's highly compressible, and it's a good shock absorber, which is why you find it in somebody like in our shoulder and our hip. It's avascular and contains no nerves. The hyaline cartilage also has chondroblasts that produce the cartilage matrix. The chondrocytes basically have the chondroblasts that are encased within the matrix. They occupy small spaces, the lacunae, and they maintain the matrix. They maintain that matrix. The perichondrium is dense, irregular connective tissue. It covers the cartilage and helps maintain its shape. So you should be able to note the functions of the osteoprogenitor cell, the osteoblast, osteocyte, and the osteoclast. What organic and inorganic substances compose the bone matrix? What are the major components of an osteon? And what are the primary ways that hyaline cartilage tissue differs from bone tissue? And then lastly, you should also be able to compare the interstitial and appositional growth of cartilage. I'll come back to cartilage growth. I should say you should be able to, in the upcoming section, be able to compare the interstitial and appositional growth of cartilage, which is coming up next.